I'm beginning to feel a strong dislike for my wife. I've been struggling with my marriage for a while now. My wife is incredibly manipulative and refuses to work or help around the house. Whenever I bring it up, she just tells me to man up and deal with it. I know deep down that I should leave her, but for some reason, I just can't bring myself to do it. Years ago, she begged me to take on a second full-time job so she could go through college. I did it, thinking it would be worth it in the end. But after she finished her degree, she suddenly decided she didn't want to work. She said she'd rather stay at home with our child instead. A year later, our second child was born, and I knew we needed more money to support our growing family. I tried to convince her to work, but she flat out refused. So I went back to school to complete a master's degree, all while juggling 2 jobs. It was incredibly tough, but I pushed through, and 3 years later, I'm the sole breadwinner for a family of 4. Despite this, I'm constantly stressed and exhausted. I work 50-hour weeks, and when I get home, I'm the one who handles the cooking, cleaning, and driving the kids around. I shoulder about 75% of the household responsibilities, and the worst part is that my wife won't lift a finger to help. I've asked her countless times to pitch in, but she always tells me she works just as hard as I do. If I'm so tired, she says, I should stop working so much. It's funny. Recently, I decided to take her advice. I took 2 weeks off work without telling her beforehand, and she completely freaked out. She was upset because she didn't know how she was going to pay for her spa day. On top of everything, she seems to feel the need to one-up me in everything. If I tell her I had a bad day, she says hers was worse because I'm lucky to get away for work while she has to stay home. If I mention that my feet hurt from walking all day during work travel, she dismisses it, saying it's nothing compared to her standing and cooking with a child clinging to her all day. For the past 2 years, she's been telling me that I've ruined her life and her opportunities. She makes me feel like absolute crap, even though she was the one who wanted to be a stay-at-home mom in the first place. There's something else I need to mention. My mother-in-law lives with us. She's an absolute gem and honestly does her best around the house, considering her age. Recently, she pulled me aside to talk. She said she's noticed changes in both me and my wife. She pointed out that I've grown much closer to my kids and, oddly enough, even to our dogs. I've been hugging them and talking to them more about my life than I do with my wife. I realize now that I'm in emotional survival mode. I'm teetering on the edge, just one step away from climbing the career ladder and one step away from finding solace at the bottom of a whiskey bottle. So, I finally confronted my wife. I didn't back down when she tried to play the victim, but instead of addressing my concerns or even attempting to discuss things, she left. She went to stay with her sister. The day after she left, she tried to come back and take the kids with her to her sister's place. Naturally, I was against this, and thankfully, so was her entire family, including her sister. It wasn't fair to our kids to uproot them and take them to a home that isn't theirs, especially since my wife doesn't work. Putting that kind of financial and housing stress on her family wasn't right. Her sister, her husband, and their 3 kids all live with their father in the house they grew up in. After a little over a week of being away, my wife must have cooled off because she just waltzed back in, bags in hand, like she'd just come back from a shopping trip to Target. She walked into my home office while I was in the middle of a conference call with my team. It was a busy time of the quarter, and I couldn't just jump off the call. She stood there staring at me angrily, but I had no choice but to stay focused on my work. I guess my wife didn't take it well when I couldn't immediately respond to her. As soon as I took off my headset and closed my laptop, she started yelling at me about how I don't care about her or her well-being. I just stood there, looking at her, shaking my head in disbelief. My mother-in-law heard the commotion and came in, pulling my wife away and telling her not to bother me. Meanwhile, our nanny kept our youngest on the other side of the house, away from the argument. That night, after the kids were in bed, I found myself alone in my office, nursing a drink, as I'd been doing for the past several nights. My wife came in, and we talked, argued, cried, and drank. One thing led to another, and we ended up in bed together. I wish I could say that was the moment we reconciled, but the next morning, as we lay there, the reality hit hard. She started going on about how difficult it was for her while she was staying at her family's house, how she had to sleep in her old room with her dad and sister's family, how lucky I am to be able to stay here, buy what I want, and not stress as much as they did. She compared her struggles to mine and to everyone else's in our family, as if my life has been so easy compared to hers, even though we had similar upbringings. That morning, something inside me broke. My mind and heart were shattered, and since then, I've been spiraling. This last week, I tried once more to reconcile and talk things out, but it only led to another shouting match. I tried to express my stress and anxieties about life and work, but she dismissed me entirely. She said, "Do you know how hard this is for me? You're supposed to help me be happy. I responded, so when it comes to my happiness, my stress, my needs, and overall well-being, I should just get over it, right? She shot back, we all have our own problems. You need to figure it out and get over them. I don't know who this woman is anymore. She's not the woman I married, not the woman I vowed to spend my life with and raise our kids together. Since that conversation, I've been lost, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. I've been noticeably distant from her lately. Most nights, I end up sleeping in my office, on the couch, or even in my kids' beds after putting them to sleep. Nothing has changed with her, though. She still starts her day at 10 a.m., sitting on her phone, chatting with her mom groups while the kids are taken care of by my mother-in-law and our nanny. I doubt anything will ever change. Honestly, even if we got a divorce, I'm not sure it would feel any different. When she left for those days, life carried on like any other day, just with a little more takeout than usual. But my biggest fear isn't losing her. It's losing my kids in the process. After a hard push from our family who staged an intervention, we finally tried marriage counseling. I'm sure you can guess how well that went. Blame, tears, regrets, and more gaslighting, all with a side of her claiming I'm the reason her life is ruined and miserable. The only difference this time was that it happened in front of a licensed therapist instead of her mom groups. In the end, everything the therapist suggested went right over her head. She ignored it all because it didn't fit her narrative. One thing worth mentioning was when the therapist asked her to recall the last time she truly felt happy. Her response? About 12 years ago. 12 years ago, she was still in her 20s, childless, and living with her ex, a completely different time and place in her life. I know it's petty of me, but if that's when she was last happy, I suppose it wouldn't be a stretch for her to find that happiness again, especially since her ex is still living in the same apartment, working the same job, and in the same place in life as he was 12 years ago. If that's how she wants to live, that's fine. I try not to judge. But for me, in my 40s with kids, going clubbing 3 or 4 days a week just isn't my thing anymore. I know my wife hasn't physically cheated on me, but I can't say the same about emotional cheating. After that therapy session, I went through all her phone records and didn't find anything unusual. I didn't bother checking apps like Instagram or Snapchat, though. Maybe I'm boring, but shout out to all the Costco dads whose Sunday fun day involves making rounds with the kids for samples. The following weekend was Father's Day, and as expected, it wasn't a big celebration for me, like it is for many dads. Our family got together for a simple BBQ, just enjoying some family time. My wife treated it like any other day. She slept in, got up to cook, spent time on her phone, did some online shopping, and made a half-hearted attempt to play with the kids. During the BBQ, she said she wasn't feeling well, so she sat around most of the day while the rest of the family made the day enjoyable. When everything was set up and we all sat down to eat, her parents, her sister's family, my mother, our kids, it was a great spread. Nothing extravagant, just a nice meal for everyone. I was chatting with my brother-in-law about our kids' school Father's Day activities, and I guess my wife overheard me mention how it was a little sad to see some kids sitting alone at the breakfast with dad event I attended. Out of nowhere, she blurted out with a laugh loud enough for the whole room to hear, "It's not like you do anything anyway." I could have gone instead. I was stunned, completely at a loss for words. I just sat there, trying to process what she had said while the dining room went dead silent. My mother-in-law broke the awkwardness, saying, "Well, maybe if you feel that way, one of you should divorce the other." My wife looked at her mother, clearly confused by the response, then laughed mockingly in my direction. She pointed at me and said, "As if another woman would want a man like him. Just look at you." The room remained silent, everyone clearly uncomfortable, but no one said a word. I felt a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, heartbreak, confusion, and embarrassment, all at once. In typical manly man fashion, I just nodded silently, stood up, grabbed my keys, and got in my truck. I drove off to get a drink, trying to block out the cries of my family and our kids telling me to stay. I have no idea what was said or done while I was gone for the rest of Sunday because I couldn't bring myself to check the house cameras. But when I returned early Monday morning, the house felt completely different. As usual, I got up around 6 a.m., got the house and our oldest ready for school, checked emails and messages. Nothing out of the ordinary. While I was getting dressed to leave, my wife was still lying in bed, snoring lightly. I just stood there looking at her, thinking about everything we once had and everything we've lost. I've decided I'm done. I can't do this anymore. That morning, I texted my lawyer to move forward with serving her. Fast forward to last week, she was served at our home. She had what you might call a mini meltdown and stormed into my office, screaming, "How could you do this to me?" Her mother intervened, but that only led to my wife accusing me of turning her whole family against her. I might have felt bad, but any sympathy I had evaporated when, for the rest of the week, She started acting like she's been an active and attentive wife and mother all these years. Sure, some might say she's making an attempt, but she's made many attempts before, and we always end up right back where we started. For those who are curious, I'm aiming for full, or at least majority custody of our kids. I'm already covering and will continue to cover all their expenses. Insurance, tuition. Both kids will be attending private school in the fall, medical bills, and so on. My mother-in-law has been a source of courage and strength for me throughout this ordeal, complementing the support I've always received from my own mother. In many ways, she embodies the kind of mother and wife I had hoped my wife would be for our kids and me. Out of respect for her, and in line with my mother's wishes, I will continue to oversee and contribute financially to her treatment if needed. Some may think I should cut ties with her entire family, but I know firsthand the hardships a family faces while dealing with cancer, having been both a family member and a care provider. All in all, I'm prepared to go to war if necessary, but what I really want is a clean, no-fuss divorce. My wife won't be getting any alimony, so for those Redditors and mommy group members on Facebook who think she should divorce me first to get that sweet, sweet alimony money, here's the reality. 1. We live in a state that doesn't typically enforce alimony. 2. She has the means to gain immediate employment. 3. To prevent any potential issues, I will cover her insurance and bills until the divorce is finalized, or until she secures full employment. So that's that. I'm done, and now I'm just waiting for the steps to be taken for everything to be finalized. I'm sorry this isn't the most exciting story with plot twists and drama as some might have hoped for, but this is real life. I'm not sure if I'll update this once it's all finalized, which probably won't be for a few more months, depending on whether or not we go to war.